to ask the audience. Oh, we've got the first few ones coming in already.
Nice.
Welcome, everybody. We're just warming up here, telling some jokes. Michael's good at that.
Yeah. What do you call a group of Agile coaches?
No idea.
There's a gaggle of geese. There's a murder of crows. There's a school of fish, and there's an argument of coaches.
Probably around scaling frameworks and programming languages, right?
Yeah, one of my favorites is Comic Agile. That has funny ones that they give, and I think I borrowed that one from Jay Hersko of Agile Uprising. He told it to me first. It's a good one.
An argument of coaches. Well, as you guys come in, drop on the chat where you're connecting from. We would very much like to know where you're connecting from. I'll go ahead and start myself by saying that I'm in Helsinki, Finland. There we go. How about you guys, Pete and Michael? Where are you guys connecting from?
I am connecting from Washington, D.C. on the east coast of the U.S.
I live in a tale of two cities in that I'm normally in the Daytona Beach area of Florida, but right now, as the weather is still good here, I'm in cheesy Wisconsin near Madison.
All right. And we have Karen in Skanderborg in Denmark and Pierre in Drummondville in Quebec, Canada. Oh, there you go. Hello to Quebec. And Tammy from Victoria, BC in Canada as well. So Canada is winning all the awards today, right? Like you guys are the ones, the most represented here.
Oh, Canada.
There you go. There you go. I have no idea how to sing that, but I'm sure somebody will.
Not me. I don't even like to hear myself sing in the shower. Look at that. Washington, D.C. There we go. But that's Pete. That doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
But we have Merazat also from Victoria, BC.
Well, Milan, beautiful place.
Christina in Milano.
Yeah, Milano. Oh, there's
Mark
Chicago.
From Boston.
Okay. I lived
Chicago.
in Chicago.
Sriram is in Ram. What is Ram, Sriram? And Martin in Ontario. Toronto.
Good.
I visited Toronto once after a very eventful trip where I was supposed to take a one-stop flight to Toronto. Ended up taking a 3-stop flight to Toronto. That was interesting. Over the west coast of the U.S. even, and spend the night in Portland. Oh my God!
And then you had to come back to Toronto.
Yeah, so I was on the west coast, and then we came all the way to Toronto, and then from Toronto we came back to Europe. So that part was easy. Oh, we also have Bea from the Netherlands. All right, Sriram is in Victoria. Canada is taking all the words today. I mean, Adrienne also from Canada.
We appreciate everyone from Canada.
Vasavi from Victoria, BC as well.
And I've been
Very
told
good.
for any of you Canadians out there, I look a little bit like Geddy Lee of Rush. Tell me if they're right. At least my nose is almost as big.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Okay, so welcome everybody to this special edition of the Agile Online Meetup. We could have waited another month, but we really didn't want you to wait another month to hear the authors of the Shift book, Pete and Michael. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So be sure as you join in to drop in the chat where you're connecting from. We would very much like to know where you're connecting from. Tom, our regular meetup host, is going to host the Agile Online Summit at the end of the month. So be sure to tune into that. I'll drop the link on the chat if you guys want to check out the lineup of speakers and keynotes. That's already live. So just go there and check it out. But today we're here to talk about AMMI. I won't tell you who AMMI is. I'll let Pete and Michael tell you who she is. But we're here to talk about Agile adoption, Agile transformation, and the third wave of Agile, the shift from product to people, which happens to be also the title of the book. Before you guys take it away, because I know that Pete and Michael have something prepared for us, before you guys take it away, I want to know, what is the most common question you get when you introduce AMMI?
The most common question we get when we introduce AMMI is, what is AMMI? Is that like AMMI? So, because the letters are very similar. So it's like AMMI. And so, quick preview, the AMMI stands for the Agile Mindset Mapping Index. We'll come back to that and why it's called that. But yeah, so often it gets confused with a bunch of other different things. And they're like, what is this thing?
Yeah, and it's pronounced AMMI like the name. I just put it now on the chat.
Yeah.
It's not just an assessment. It goes way beyond that, which is why the word choice for AMMI is a little bit different than, some people will, like Pete was inferring, will say Agile Maturity Matrix Index, which is like CMMI. We don't get into that here. This is a very different co-creative way of doing it. And of course, that's going to be a big part of what we talk about. And actually use together, we will go through how you can use AMMI and how Pete and I will leverage it to help you with your challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we go through the presentation, remember to put in your questions in the chat. Later on, once the first few minutes of the presentation are over, we will start a lean coffee session where you will be able to interact directly with Pete and Michael. VJ, hi, VJ in Chicago, welcome. But now it's up to you guys. So who's going to take it away?
I'm going to kick off the slides here, but Michael is going to get us started. So take it away, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I actually wasn't sure which one of us was going to present, so now I know. So here we just do a quick introduction. Pete will introduce himself. For me, I've been involved in the software industry since back in the day. I got a little bit of gray hair here at the young age of 10.
You're lucky. I've lost it already.
Yeah, well, I can't grow what you got in front of your face on your chin.
Yeah, my hair grew upside down, right? It started growing down instead of up.
It's reverse for me. With it better or worse, it's just diversity, right? So I've been doing software development as a developer at a young age. I built a text-based adventure game called Earth Dweller that unfortunately you can't find anymore, but it was like Zork for those of you who have been like old-time text-based adventure gamers. And from there, I did development. I've got degrees in that, and I've also got an MBA and got into project management, did the traditional project management world. Then I heard about this thing Agile in 2002 at Halliburton KBR. And from there, I was hooked and have been doing that, blended with change management principles, especially modern change management, as well as just wondering and having a lot of excitement with the scaling wars that have happened lately and seeing where that's going. The one that I've picked at the moment is Scaled Agile. I'm sure everybody's heard about that if you've been in Scrum at all or anything else. But the other ones always have something interesting to offer as well. So that's a bit of my background. One last thing, I've done almost every IT role there is, other than maybe IT cleanup crew. But even then, I've been support before, 7x24, by the way. So that's me, Pete.
I have also done just about every IT role, including IT cleanup crew. My first job out of college was working in telecommunications. and setting up like the actual connections and the routers and all that kind of stuff. But I got my starts. I'll go as specific as to say that I graduated in the last century, to give you a sense of sort of how old I am. But I've been doing this for a while. Started off as a developer, was a architect and a systems engineer for a while, and then had a fantastic idea for how to develop and sell, new innovative software. So I started my own company, and then learned the difference between having a great idea and selling a great idea. And that got me into lean startup and understanding more about how to create a business, how to create a product, all that kind of stuff. I had already learned a lot of stuff and started people-centered, which is the focus of our book and the stuff that Michael and I work on, through launching one of the first online universities in the world. That'll also date me a little bit. And that just sort of led me into this place of consulting with folks on people-centered practices and on sort of business startup, entrepreneurial, product-based kind of things. So I've been doing that for quite a few years. And so that kind of brought me through Agile, though I learned Agile when I was a developer, brought me back around to sort of coaching Agile. And I noticed that there's a lot of stuff that we learned how to do that other people didn't. And so Michael and I figured we'd put that into a book, so that we could sort of have this context of, that everybody could experience what we experienced.
So we've got a question already on chat, and I think it's kind of apropos as we start the presentation. The question is from VJ. Since we're talking about Agile 3.0, what is Agile 2.0? So let walk us through the 3 waves.
Let's do that. Go for it, Michael.
All right. So as you can see here, this is, of course, coming from my experience and what I've heard in the industry back in the day. Pre-2000, there was Scrum and XP, and then when it came 2002, wave 1 from traditional project management, traditional waterfall delivery, started at United Space Alliance and NASA in the 70s, became Agile. And that was the first wave of changes in how we deliver. And so that was the Agile mindset wave. Around 2010 or so, I started going to events with people such as Dave Hussman in Chicago. Might as well give my wave to Chicago. And
may he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. That's right. The dude is no longer with us. And he started talking about from project to product. So I started hearing about that in 2010. It's like, focus on products. Focus on building meaningful products that have better outcomes instead of just following your iron triangle of the schedule, the cost, and the scope. And so that was when I thought, okay, that's the second wave. David Hussman and others are going on that. And you even hear Mick Kirsten in his book From Project to Product is in that wave as well. But there's a new wave coming up, and that's kind of been here all along, and it's built into the Agile Manifesto. And that's from going from product to people. People make excellent products. People make crappy products. There's too many crappy products out there, not enough excellent products. And it really comes down to people on both sides of the world, meaning the ones that are consuming it and the ones that are producing it. And that's what we're writing this book on, because we have not found any really good books that go into focusing on people on both sides to make the best products possible. You hear about it a lot. You hear blogs and vlogs and so on, but we're not quite there yet. So VJ, I'll pay you later for asking that question. And that's where we get into people-centered everything, as we say here. It's all about all problems that are centered around people. People problems are the hardest problems to solve, and they cause all the rest of the problems to happen. And then you can see that we've got here getting some specific, specifics related to the book. The book gets into our bringing in goals of business models, improving the model of your business, your processes. Deming, W. Edwards Deming, the godfather of lean, I like to call him, would go into that thing. It's not the people that you want to fix. It's the processes you want to fix. And so from there, we wrote this book in an interesting manner that for a tech book, as far as I know, this is an original, and that is each chapter is a different person's perspective. Now, we'll have the same person be in their perspective for different chapters, but you'll get like 8 or 9, and it might even be more than that by the time we finish the book, where you get the perspective of a designer, the perspective of the leader, the perspective of product management, a Scrum Master perspective. All those perspectives are going to be in there, so you get to see a holistic way of viewing anything that's done, and that way we can empathize with them. And then we bring in a lot of educational pieces. We call them the learning moments, the teachable moments, with how you can apply the pitfalls that they go into through the book itself.
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges in doing a people-centered approach to things, and it's not something that is easily explainable. So that's why we ended up having to write this book like a novel, because we found that we couldn't just give details. We couldn't just give descriptions. It's all the nuances and the details and the muddy stuff, that goes into really dealing with people as people and humans as humans that makes a difference between success and failure.
And the book really talks about the muddy stuff. It starts with the crisis, right? So there's Nomi thinking whether she should have a second latte that morning.
Yeah, it's a bad day when you're not even at 10 a.m. yet, and you're like, I need another coffee. I need another like big gigantic venti coffee. Like I can't. So it starts off in some difficult places, and that's where we find a lot of our clients. And they've already gone through a bunch of different problems. They've gone through a bunch of things. Things aren't working. Things are, failing. They're not having the returns that they thought that they were going to get. And so they're looking for what happened, what went wrong. And that's where AMMI starts to come in. And so we're going to describe a process today that you can use to look at your organizations and sort of figure out where are the pitfalls, where are we potentially missing things, so that we can turn things around.
Yeah, and I want to add, let's keep moving forward, but I want to add that with AMMI, it's had some real world experience. It's been applied at real clients. So there's some real experience behind this. This isn't something that just was created in the garage and we're just bringing it out to you. Matter of fact, we've had other sessions like this to talk about AMMI before.
Yeah, this project has really been going on for many, many years in the research and the categorization. I don't think that's a word, but I'm going to use it anyway. So when we sort of started to catalog and this idea of like, why does Agile fail at certain times? Sometimes it works great. A lot of times it works great, but sometimes it doesn't. And why is that? When does that happen? When does that we put all these things and started researching together, and we started to notice that there were some patterns. And so we pulled it together. And so one of the first sort of main issues is that oftentimes we know that there's problems, but then we ignore them. So we don't know how to fix them maybe, or we assume that it's somebody else's job to do it. And so we end up skipping over problems and they just fester and they sit there, and then we kind of forget that they're there. We don't ever really forget that they're there, but we forget that we can do something about it. And they always are there in the way. So one of the first things that we do when we really try to apply this approach that we discovered and researched is really start to bring those problems back and to make a list of that. And so we've got a lean coffee website here to collect a list of problems from everybody here and have a discussion about it. So Michael's going to paste that into the chat so that everybody can click on that and head on over to the Lean Coffee Table board. And really, we just want you to start entering in some ideas of some problems or challenges that get you worked up, that things that you factor into, maybe things that you have already solved, maybe things that are appearing now, maybe things that you've forgotten about. One of the best ways to sort of uncover forgotten problems is to think about things that get your emotions going. So what gets you really angry? What gets you really sad? What gets you really fearful? Estimates. Yeah, so estimates might be one of the problems that you have. So yeah, add those things to the board, make a list of those things. We're going to start with that, and we're gonna come back to those and add those things in. So if you've got another version of one, go ahead and add it in. We'll do some dot voting later and look at things. But first, we're going to start with this problem. We're going to talk about problems. We're going to make a list of problems and prioritize them so that we're dealing with the most important problem first. And then what you do with that makes all the difference in the world. So that's going to be our next couple steps here.
Just take a moment and think about a current challenge you have. No estimates might be one that, or I hate estimates. Just think about it. Write it down on a piece of paper or whatever tool you have handy if you don't have Lean Coffee access. It's a real easy access as a guest. But just think of one right now and put that in your back pocket for later because we're going to crank that through with AMMI.
All right. So keep adding some items into there. I'm going to talk about the next thing that we discovered. So the next problem that we ran into is actually this problem of not my job. There's a famous, you probably saw it on the previous slide there. There's a famous quote from a Polish saying that's "Nie mój cyrk, nie mój małpi," which means "not my circus, not my monkey." And it's sort of this famous saying of like, not my problem, not my thing to worry about. But one of the things that we find in the Agile space is that when we go to that place, when we say that thing, we lose opportunities to solve our own problems. Because Agile is more about collaboration than it is about any kinds of roles. And actually, if you look across all the different flavors of Agile, you're going to find that some of them have product managers and some of them have product owners. Some of them have project managers. Some of them think project managers don't exist and don't have, that's a horrid, word. And some places completely embrace it. We've got people who are, just developers and business analysts and testers, and we've got our three amigos, and then other forms of Agile that are like, everybody should be an engineer. And if you split them down any less than that, everybody's got their own reasons and problems and thoughts about what an Agile roles are. And it turns out roles don't matter for Agile. Roles matter inside your organization. But as far as what we're talking about for Agile, roles don't really come into play. It comes into play more sort of, how we collaborate, who's taking on which responsibilities as we collaborate. So one of the things that we drive on is points of collaboration, and we focus on those instead of focusing on the roles. So the 6 main points of collaboration that we found in our research is most of the stuff clumps together into 1 of 6 categories. It's either people practices, it's design practices, it's planning practices, implementation, operations, sorry, I missed one, verification and operations. So you'll notice that there's something is in there like implementation. You might be used to terms like coding, but Agile applies to many more places than just software. So implementation kind of represents that sort of generic concept, however it might happen, whether it be with code or not. Likewise, with testing is somewhat more of a Agile or a software kind of centric term, but everybody does some kind of verification in their process. So we use the term verification there. And then operations is all that stuff that kind of keeps the lights on. I also noticed that there's an error here and all of these columns are switched by 1. So assume that this one over here on the right with reviews, benefits, culture, and growth has to do with people. And then these other pieces here. I'll fix that before we send the deck out, and I apologize for that. But I didn't want anybody to be confused on this.
That was an intentional test on Pete.
All right. So think of those points of collaboration. So step 1 there was to think about problems in your organization. Maybe think about what's getting, under your skin the most. Now take that problem and think about what is the point of collaboration where that problem appears. Does it appear when we are dealing with people issues and we're just talking about, the human issues of growth tasks and culture and improvements and all these kinds of stuff? Does it appear when we're doing design tasks and we're trying to figure out what to build? Does it appear when we're doing the implementation tasks and we already figured out what to build, but now we're actually doing the process of building it? Or does it have to do with the operations, the things that keep the lights on and keep everything running? Think about where those different points of collaboration are, and that's going to tell you who you need to involve in order to be able to solve this problem. It also tells you who you don't need to involve. So another place of waste that we find and failure and problem parts that we have is when people get pulled into meetings and they get pulled into activities that don't have anything to do with what they're doing. And so this is another thing that sort of really helps to solve the problem, is identifying your points of collaboration wherever your problems pop up and show themselves. All right. So I would ask that out to the group here. So in the chat, where are the different problems that you run into on a usual basis? Or if you think about that one problem that's maybe at the top of your mind right now, where does that show up? Go ahead and type that into the chat. Do you tend to have people problems? Are you having design problems, planning problems? Too many webinars? Really, Michael? You had to go there? Too many webinars? I understand Zoom fatigue. That's a big one right now. So we can put that in there. Zoom fatigue, could be a big one. And so when does that happen? Which ones are the biggest problem points? Because maybe, being on Zoom around an activity that is your job, you're getting things done. But then you get invited to all those other Zooms that take up the other 7 hours of the day, where you are not, getting anything done, and you are not having an impact on things. And you're just sitting there passively listening. So those are some of the things that we can pay attention to as well. So, any other thoughts from the folks in the audience? What are some of the categories, the points of collaboration that tend to be the more frustrating parts for you, or tend to be the most bogged down?
Somebody will write people, I bet. There's this Finnish rescue worker who was working in the tsunami that hit the Southeast Asia area, Thailand. There was a lot of Finns stranded there. And of course, unfortunately, a lot of people died. And he was being asked on TV, how do you feel? I mean, you're working with so many dead bodies around you. Don't you have problems with that? And the guy very honestly said, no, I have no problems with dead people. It's the live people that cause problems for me.
Oh, wow.
He was honest.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any they want to bring up right now in chat? I'm seeing more questions. Design from Christina. Thank you, Christina. That's a whole mountain of meaning behind it. But that's one, right? Design, poorly designed products that are often. How many people have been with product owners or product managers that say, I know exactly what the customer wants, and so here it is, they're going to love it, right? Anybody ever had that? Yes, no in the chat?
Yeah, where design becomes more of a push than a collaboration.
Right? Okay, Vasco's being honest.
Every day, guys, every day. And this happens even with people who want to be agile.
It's hard to get out of our own bias, especially if you're a hot shot, I'll call, product manager that's been successful in the past. You start getting a bit full of yourself and think that you got all the answers. And oftentimes you do have the right answer, but you're not really sure, until the user tries it. Then you find out. And that's where the challenge comes. When everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, as Mike Tyson's been known to say.
Yeah. And so that's one of the core things that we talk about actually in the book, is that situation. Because a lot of times people aren't forced to face it until the users don't respond in the way you think they're going to. And then they respond not in the way really badly, not in the way that you think. And then you have to rethink how you're doing things. Oftentimes we are hindered by our success because we've made good guesses in the past and it's worked, or we have users that are captive who can't really go anywhere else. We end up being able to, to be able to make choices and roll them out, and we never get faced with the consequences of those choices. But then eventually they do. Eventually they come back and bite us. And that's the point where we get an opportunity to look at something new and to have a new opportunity and make some different choices. All right, so step one in our process. Thank you, Mark and Adrienne and Meherzad, Max, for some inputs here. So we got our problem steps here. We've got identifying where our points of collaboration are in there.
You almost said collision, which would probably be true.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina. So now the third thing that I want to draw your attention to is that we found that there is often a problem or a failure point where people identified these things, but then they said, oh, but there's nothing I can do about this. This is outside my sphere of influence. And so then they just chalked it up and they stopped paying attention to it. But it still caused a huge problem. So we really want to take a look at this idea of what is within your sphere of influence or not. And generally, it comes around to these four kind of different categories. So you've got the team. You've got the people who you work with on a regular basis. You've got product teams that sort of encompass that. So that might be multiple teams who are working together to accomplish on a particular product line. In SAFe, that's commonly called like the team of teams or the value stream. Then you've got your organization, which encompasses multiple different product teams that are working together. And that can even blur the lines a little bit, because you might be working together to work on a product with somebody from another corporation. Maybe you have subcontractors or you have partners that you're working together. So for our purposes, we're sort of grouping those things together to say, if we're working on the same product, those are part of our product team. If we're working together to accomplish something, even though we have organizational boundaries, we'll consider that, we are a partner organization. We're, paired together on that. But then outside of that, there are these extra sort of problems and things that abound outside of the scope of our organizations, but are very common between multiple different organizations. And so we call those sort of the global impact. So this is just sort of a visual representation. On the next slide here, I've got the same things kind of broken down in just sort of a list sphere. So this idea of the sphere of influence is sort of looking at, everybody's part of a team. So everybody's got somebody they work with on a regular basis, and they're working on stuff, and they can make some decisions inside of that. Some people are working together with other teams, and they're part of a collaborative process. Some people are, work in that space. Maybe you're a director or an executive, and so you might be working in that org space, or somebody who's working with finance might be managing a bunch of different teams. They may not work at the team. They might have their own finance team, but they wouldn't work with maybe an individual Agile team. So they might work in that organizational space. And so their sphere of influence would be different than like a typical developer or a Scrum Master or somebody who is working on one of those implementation teams. And then you have other people who are dealing with some of these, broad general issues. Maybe they're trying to tackle climate change, or, they're really focused on positive psychology, or they work in like HR and they're trying to find better ways to support the growth of employees within the company. It's something that all organizations are faced with. And so that creates a special sort of fourth class or fourth area of size. All right. I'm seeing this one. Often teams don't see they can connect and collaborate with an outside world. Yeah. Sometimes the answers to your problems are outside your organization. It's looking at patterns out in the industry that tell you more about your situation and your organization. An obsession of the product without considering the how of co-designing a product. Co-design, working with multiple teams. You might have a product that's so large that it can't be built by one team, and so one team is designing one piece of it, another team is designing another piece of it, but they're not paying attention to how those pieces work with each other until maybe the very end. And that's where a lot of DevOps stuff comes in, and integration work. And that can be another place where things start to fall apart. So those are the four main categories there. So going back through, we're identifying problems based on things that they're pissing us off, or making us sad, or getting us, making us fearful. Then looking at our points of collaboration, and then our spheres of influence. And one last point I want to make about a sphere of influence is that there is a difference between our range of control, that where we get to make the decisions, and the range where we get to influence and have a voice. And then there's the stuff that's outside of that. And we need to know the difference for this. So if we get to make the call, we have more power to do a bunch of different things because it's within our range of control. If we don't get to make the call, but it's just part of, we can express our voice, then we need to know that that's our way to make change, is to express our voice. So we may have something that's outside of our control, and in the past, like we, just stopped talking about it because we couldn't do anything about it. What I want to encourage you to do is to talk about it with the people that you do have influence over and say, hey, we have this problem. We can't solve it. We try to solve it. We can't, do anything about it. but I think you can, or at least you might know somebody who can. And your job here is to talk about it and make sure that it is in somebody's radar in order to be addressed. And then that leads out to that sort of space that's sort of outside of our spheres of influence. All right. So then what do we do with that? How do we set that up? How do we solve this? That's where the AMMI came into play. So this is where this is. So now you've seen like how AMMI was sort of built together, or what the research resulted in, is these different categorizations of stuff. And it's really about mindsets. It's about understanding the mindset within that sphere of working with a team. So, we cataloged all the different practices that we had, and we started putting it together. We looked at there's people activities that happen at the team level, and people activities at the product level, people activities at the market level, organization wide, and impact things. So when we put all these things together, you've now got 24 different possible categories of practices that you can do. And so we started looking at which practices ended up where. And we started grouping those things in together. So we've got a whole list of things. We've got like about 3 different practice categories for people at the team level. So collaborative growth, individual growth, listening and appreciation. And what we were making a list of is, when these things were missing, did it hurt teams? Or could it be missing in one team and make no impact at all? But if it was missing in another team, then it did make an impact. And that helps to draw the lines between what really is important and what isn't important. That also started to produce this idea that there are multiple different ways to do it, and they're all successful. They all work. So if you're doing Scrum, you might do things like user story mapping because you're using stories. You might have spikes, and you have a definition of ready, and you do planning poker, and you do sprints and burn down charts. And all that stuff is valid because you're inside of sprints. But if you're doing Kanban, you might not do that stuff. You might not have sprints. You might not worry about burn down charts. What you might be focused on instead is your WIP limits, your work in progress limits. Are we, keeping things within our WIP limits? You might be using things like mob programming if you're using, extreme programming. And that is serving the same goal as collaborative planning. So if you're doing mob programming, you probably don't need planning poker. If you're doing work in progress limits, you might not need estimates. Going back to Vasco's thing, there's,
I like that.
Yeah, there's many different ways where you can achieve the goal, and they're all good. But what's important is that if you are not doing one of the practices in one of these categories, then that might be the reason why you're having a problem. So this chart helps to sort of bring things together and notice, where do you have a solution? Oh yeah, we do that. Okay, that category is covered. Oh, we do that. That category is covered. We don't do anything in this category. Maybe we should. So then we're going to give you a listing of all the different possible solutions, like the different techniques that are out there, so that you yourself can pick which solution that you want to do and pick the solution that matches for you. We're just going to show you sort of what the gaps are that come in the middle of those things. All right, so that is the basics of AMMI. That's sort of how that works and how that goes into things. So we're going to go into more detail with the library itself and go out to the library things. But I want to look at some problems that you all may be facing, and then sort of walk through and do this kind of shaping and research based upon those problems. So I'm switching over to the Lean Coffee board right now. I'm seeing a lot of really good topics. So I guess I didn't stop for questions. So I can take some questions here as we go this. Plus also, I'll hand it over to you, Michael, for starting off the Lean Coffee Table voting.
I will put the link on there for anybody that may have come late, although it looks like we have the same people. And here we go with screen sharing. On Windows 10, I'm not a Mac fan yet, or Apple boy like Pete is. So not on Windows 11 quite yet. I expect to do so. I've been hearing the initial thing is it's just lipstick on a pig, but I'm sure.
No. It's rounded corners on a pig.
Rounded corners on a pig, even better. That sounds like a ham feast for the holidays coming up. So here we go. I've got my dark mode going, so hopefully this is clear enough for everybody. And I put the link back in. We've got about, looks like close to a little over a dozen, maybe 15 items here. That's great. If you haven't used the Lean Coffee table, real simple instructions. You want to add something, you just type it in here, you hit enter, and it pops up below and it keeps a number on it. And then you can edit your own. But there's this one thing that's real important. We get 3 votes each. I see about 10 people or so are on here. And some people haven't voted yet, like Mel, Pierre, Tammy, and Vasco, I guess you're voting. Christina's got 1 vote left. Bob's got 2. I'm not going to vote. And Pete's not going to vote. We'd rather keep our own opinions out of this. And once you add your votes in, we'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to come in or till people stop voting. And then we're going to sort by these. And the top one that has the most votes is the one we're going to talk about first, using AMMI as a means to address the challenge you're having. We're not Moses and Jesus. We can't do miracles here on this, but we can show you a path that you might have been stuck on before, leveraging AMMI to show you that direction.
We can't flex waters.
Just as we go through the Lean Coffee, I just want to tell everybody that you have the option to request to speak, and then we can give you the permission, and then we can have a conversation. So on the right side of your screen on the browser, there will be an option to request to speak. I see that Mariana, Melissa, Molly, and Tammy have already done that. That's great. And as we start the discussion, Michael, just let me know, and then I can open the microphone.
Okay, we'll give a few more minutes here. Mel, somebody named just V. That must be V for Vendetta. That's Vilifying, one of my favorite all-time movies. And we've got Christina still in B. I don't have a movie named B that is one of my all-time favorites, but that person's got a vote left. So let's give it a minute or so. I could put it on the Google timer, but I don't think you need to do that. Just see these dots go down. There are a lot of choices to pick from to read through them, so that could be slowing people down a little bit too. Just pick a favorite if you have to, and you can spam all your votes on the one place if you want to as well. It doesn't have to be. You
guys have been very productive at creating entries in the Lean Coffee. Well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
While we wait, I can present my beautiful Scrum Master Summit mug with this amazing Deming quote, who got name checked already.
Oh, I don't know that Deming quote. That's a good one.
And then, of course, the logo.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
And I am speaking at not the Scrum Master Summit. Pete and I did do the last
Agile Online Summit.
Yeah, but the Agile Online Summit, I'm speaking at two tracks. One on the scaling side, the other on the change side. I just did the recording for the change side one, and it's going to be fun. So, little plug. Wasn't planning on doing this, but it's called Change at the Speed of Government, which means people think snails and the Postal Service. If anybody knows, U.S. government Postal Service is actually slowing down. They're making it go slower so they can actually start making a profit and be able to be more consistent, not losing your mail. So go think about that. The rest of the world's going faster. U.S. Postal Service slowing down. Okay, I think we've got enough. Miriam's the only one I see here that still hasn't done all your votes. Miriam, if you put it in, that's great. But I'm going to go ahead and start the discussion, which is going to sort these. Boom. Here we go. We got one which looks like about 6 votes. And that discussion is build consensus across large group of stakeholders on business value. So I take this and I move it here. I'm going to give, why don't we give 10 minutes, Pete?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, we're going to do 10 minutes for the first part. We could always stop early. And what we'll do here is we'll take the AMMI, and Pete, if you want to share the screen. If anybody first, which I like to do, is if you want to talk about this, let us know, and then you can speak on it, whoever was the one that did this. And I think I could show the offer here. Yeah, Martin. Martin, if you want to talk about this, I could help as well if there's anything in particular you'd like to talk about.
All right. So we are talking about building consensus across a large group of stakeholders on business value.
Martin, did you want to talk about this at all? Just in the chat? Yes, no?
Well, specifically, I want to hear some of the first initial questions on here. So where do we see this popping up? Is this problem popping up in the design space? Is it popping up in the planning space?
So Martin, you have the mic on now.
He's probably double muted, which is, of course, the quote of 2020 and 2021.
No, okay. Well, we'll just continue.
All right. For the other folks who voted for this, go ahead and type into chat as well. So where are the places where you see this manifesting for you? Is this, because that makes a difference in how we approach this. So is this something that's showing up between teams is the problem? I think it seems like it from the description of it. Is this something that's showing up as a planning activity or as a design activity? Because when it happens makes a big difference on execution and impact.
And I put the topic in the chat just in case you don't see it, so everyone's aligned on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, and Martin is now in the room. Can you talk to us,
Yeah.
Martin?
Sorry.
Yeah. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry,
can.
I had to connect to my audio. I just wanted to talk about my experience in working in large multinational organizations where there's a lot of hidden agendas across different business units. And it's very challenging at times to achieve consensus and the right priorities for the deliverables across a very large community.
There we go. So that gives us a scope there. So what I'm hearing is that we're talking about a problem that's showing up between product lines. And so that's in that kind of space, the organization space that we call. So I'm going to go take a look at some of the organizational practices that we have here. Now, if we're looking at things like, people-driven things, this could be, a potential for this. So it could be that we are not using goal-based leadership. It could be that we have some bias that's being built in that needs to be addressed. It could be that it's in the design category. So maybe we need to be doing some work on sort of market positioning. Or another problem that I often find is the lack of the use of the scientific method, where what we're doing is that we're in these debates because it's kind of power driven. Who's got the louder voice? And so by looking at sort of the scientific method or capturing some metrics, we can start to put experiments around things and say, you might be right. And this other person over here in this other program might be right also. They might also be wrong. How do we know? How do we measure impact? So if we're trying to decide between the budgets and who gets allocated how much money, what are the impacts of that? So the scientific method, I actually see in the chat that, this question of, example of the scientific method. So the scientific method is specifically looking at the a couple steps that are sort of built into what we've designed, we've figured out as a scientific method. And the first step is sort of look at this idea of the scope and how you could measure something. So how could you measure sort of success or failure in something? So if we're talking about a product and product adoption, so then maybe it's about, how many people are using this product or service? Could we make the number of people using this product service go up or down based on changes that we make to our actions? And then really using the scientific method is actually, you assume the opposite. So if you think that by making this change that we are going, our profits are going to go up, we then put into place and say, all right, so we're going to make this change, but we're going to assume that our profits are going to stay stable. So we need to collect some information. So we're going to put this stuff out. We're going to collect information. We're going to look for whether or not we end up having the same outputs before we made the change as after we made the change. And we're either going to prove ourselves right or we're going to prove ourselves wrong. And by collecting that data and looking for the ways that we could be wrong, that's where we start to open up these possibilities. Because when we only look for what's possible about what's right, we might do things about, we want this to be popular. We want more people to purchase this thing. So maybe what we're looking for is we want to get more hits to the page. And so if we see more hits to the page go up, then we think, great, this feature is more product or more popular, or that it maybe has something to do with purchases, like people buy this product more. And so over the next month, we want to see the number of product purchases go up. But if more people buy the product, but they don't like the new feature, and therefore they throw our product away, or they start telling everybody else that we, don't buy this product, that new feature screwed it up. It just added rounded circles and lipstick to the pig, for Windows 11, whatever that, sort of is, that's happened. And then sales start to tank. So you might see this rise and you're like, oh, this is fantastic. We love this change. We're going to keep this change. But then that resulted in sales going down later on as this sort of negative work, sort of conversation started going out. So looking for those points where you can prove that you're right or try to prove yourself wrong. How, if you were wrong, how would you know? That's really what we're looking for when it comes to the scientific method.
I'd like to add into this first a confession on AMMI. You'll notice that Pete's clicking on things, but it doesn't go anywhere. So AMMI's still a work in progress and always will be. We're always iterating and improving on it. And we do have backup information and guidelines, etc., on these practices. And so we just don't have them posted yet for the organizational level. We're still working on getting that onto the website. I would like, Pete, if you don't mind, I'm going to share what's in the underneath the hood.
Okay.
With regards to this by putting up, I think it's this screen. I'm hoping I got the right screen here. Let me know if you're seeing the screen. Nope, wrong screen. I can change that. That's the book. But I will pull this over there.
That's a secret chapter that nobody's read yet.
Yeah, that was chapter 8. Hopefully no screenshots for the quick trigger fingers there. But in any event, we do have these laid out in that I think goal-based leadership gives you a little bit of a hint on the direction to take here. In that I grabbed the book of Lean Change Management from Jason Little and Change Agility as well. And you'll notice that it comes up with the Stephen Covey quote, begin with the end in mind. It's about alignment. It's about establishing those strategic themes. We know that leadership have a hard time even agreeing on what the word strategy means for them within any context. And getting them to work together and collaborate with each other to come up with a set of strategic themes and then vision for their portfolios of projects that they may have and products that they have can be a tremendous effort. And you have to build in a lot of trust and have a lot of cause and purpose with probably a sense of urgency to help them to start tearing down their own silos and be able to work together. That's a tall feat. And that is where a lot of the challenge you'll have is just working with these people. So you got to find your champions, the ones that really are willing to take the dive, that leap of faith in doing this and getting the strategic themes together with those other people that are going to be the ones that can lead the change. And everyone's invited to the dance, but not everybody has to dance. If they get invited and they don't come because they don't believe in it, that's their choice, but at least they were invited. So we want to use that way and build it out from those that do come and make that build out from there. So I think that's a big part of it. That's a people problem and one of the most complex. And there's a lot of muddy details, as Pete was mentioning here, with the nuances and so on. But the approach is finding your champions, building a change coalition, and then getting alignment under those strategic themes and then building it out from there.
All right, guys, we're getting close to the end of this topic. Since we have about 10 minutes left, I would suggest we pick another topic to show off how AMMI could help us explore possible practices and solutions for that topic. If I look at the next topic on the list of in Lean Coffee is manage products portfolio as an agile way. I think Bob wrote that. So Bob, if you want to come in and explain what you mean by that, you can just request to speak on the right side of your browser window, and then I can I can allow you to get the microphone, then you can ask the question.
I'm going to give this one 5 minutes so we can hustle a little bit more through the material that people have, so equal representation. We'll see how this goes.
All right. So how would we go about using AMMI to explore this problem, guys?
All right. And we're going to hear from Bob first, or?
Nah.
All right. So we could be looking at this. So let me give you an example of a switch on this. So of looking at one of the other topic categories, because we could be looking at, like, my sphere of influence doesn't reach up to the executive. My sphere of influence may only goes up to the point of sort of the product scope. And so if we're looking at this, we're kind of talking a little bit about, it's not about management. We're talking about, sort of, while it's talking about managing product portfolio, we're talking about value. We're getting into that space that's really kind of more about design and designing for value. So one of the things that we can do to help show the value of the product line that we're doing, if our sphere of influence ends sort of at the product space, is to go to that design category. Let me go ahead and...
You want to share your screen on which one you're looking at? Thank you.
You got it. There we go. So in the product category here, I'm going to go to the design section on things. And so now you can go through and you can look at different things like the points of guidance. So now, because I know the system pretty well, I'm going to skip past a few things. So the team alignment is maybe not as big of a deal here, but iterative customer delivery might have a bit for this. So are we doing multiple releases to our customers? If we're doing big, complex releases, then we may not be able to collect a lot of data from our customers to really show that they like and enjoy the stuff that we're putting out there. Are we, having multiple customer iterations to get to some better outcomes? So are we measuring those outcomes for those things as we go along? Also, customers can be very unpredictable. So having more releases to the customers gives us more opportunities for feedback. So if we're trying to justify this to a executive as to why we should do this, why this should be a part of what we're doing for our product line, collecting some data from the customers to back it up can make a big difference. And the more that we get into iterative customer delivery, the more data that we have. And so we can use some techniques like, actually a big one up here would be like minimum viable products, having beta customers. So we can go out and reach and find some beta customers to try out some of the things that we want to do in sort of the early versions of this. There's a DevOps technique called canary releases, where we take some of those beta or alpha customers, those people who have agreed to get stuff when it's not quite baked yet, when it could fail, it could have bugs in it, and they're totally fine with that because they want to try out the new features. And we make those things available to just those customers, get some early feedback from them, and find out some more information about it. So those are a bunch of different approaches that we could use, and so that customer delivery part could get us to that piece. Now, if we're finding that we're having some of those planning discussions, the places as a product team where we get to participate in that are things like the economic prioritization. So I'm going to skip over here to the planning section. So economic prioritization, looking at the value of things. So there's the value of the work can be generated through potential income. The value of work could also make other things in the organization work or not work. And the value of work could add to the organizational knowledge and inspire innovation. So that there's three different ways that we can sort of look at how we add value and how we talk about our value to the executives. So maybe we aren't an income generating application, but we make sure that we help make sure all of these other systems run, and the information that we collect through our system enables us to come up with new and better ideas for product B and product C. So you can go through and sort of look at some of those other different ways that we can talk about our value. Gives you ideas on how you could do some data collection for forecasting futures. That'll give you some nice things, burn up charts, velocity, things like that. Long range planning is maybe less tying into this particular one. So, and this gives you some ideas for a variety of different ways to do stakeholder reporting. So it's a technique that's out there of how to take all this great stuff that we do and put it in a format that people can read and that people want to read.
Yeah.
There's only a few minutes left. I do want to remind everybody that they can get Pete and Michael's book. I've just put the link on the chat. And the first few chapters are already live and you can read through them. And as you just saw a moment ago, we will also have chapter 8 coming out soon. So if you join now, you'll get the other chapters, of course, as well. Guys, before we end for today, of course, first, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge. But do tell our audience, where can they go to find out more about AMMI and the methods and tools that you guys have been collecting in that website?
Yeah, we go to the Library of Agile, which I put the link back down into the chat. And as mentioned, this is freely available to everyone. Now, some of it's a work in progress. The team and the product levels are fully populated. The organizational and the worldwide ones, I'll call them, are still work in progress as far as formally releasing them for everybody. They will come out sometime in the future. Take a look at them. I like to consider them in comparison to the what is it? I can't remember the name of it. I'm having a mind blank. The liberating structures. There it is. Okay. And that you can put these together. You can have them combine with each other and leverage them off of each other. It's not always just one aspect of AMMI is for a particular challenge that you have. You can string these together and that way make them more powerful with each other.
Yes. And the library itself can be very helpful because sometimes when we walk in and say, hey, we should probably do this change, folks are like, who, like, you're Sam, you're VJ, like, you're the person I work with. Why should I trust you? Why should I believe you? Like, you're in the same problem boat as I am. And we find this as coaches that people believe us more because we come from the outside than when we're actually there. So then the people, we might be saying the exact same thing that you're saying inside of your organization, but because we come from the outside, people listen to us instead of listening to you. So you can use this as a way to point to and say, hey, it's not me saying this. I mean, look, the Library of Agile says that we should take a look at this technique. So that's one of the things that we find that we, a little tip.
Borrow credibility. Great technique.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to get in touch with you and maybe ask a few more questions after today, where can they find you?
Well, you can definitely find us on LinkedIn. So my handle there is Pete OK. You can also look for like the Oliver-Krueger. I am the only person with an Oliver-Krueger as a last name in all of LinkedIn, which is pretty unique. Maybe there's two of us. And then Michael, Agile Michael Dougherty over there is his link as well. And we also, are happy to send out these slides so that people can follow these links directly and you have a reference for it. So that you can check and find out.
Yeah, and the video will be available for people to check out as well. Spectacular.
And you can sign up for our book, and then you'll have a chance to interact with us and give us more feedback.
Get the book. Absolutely. It's a great story, by the way. And Pete and Michael are making it better. Every month. That's the current frequency. They just released the second version of Chapter 1, which I think is much better than the original version. And hopefully they'll make some small tweaks there and make it even better soon.
We will.
Thanks for sticking around, everyone. Good to see you all virtually, and hope to catch up with you in other places and other times. Come to the Agile Online Summit, too. It's going to be
fun. Don't hesitate to get in touch and interact with Pete and Michael on LinkedIn. I mean, that's a great place to ask questions and learn more about AMMI and the other stuff they're working on. Bye-bye, everybody. Enjoy your day, enjoy your evening, and the rest of the week.
Yes. Thanks for joining us.